Welcome to another fantastic, exciting, and as always, life-changing episode of Kennedy Saves the World. And this time, I'm going to save your existence because I have the great pleasure of talking to arguably and without question the greenest member of Congress. He represents the 4th District in Kentucky. He is a fan favorite on the Kennedy program weeknights at 8 p.m. Eastern on the Fox Business Network. Thomas Massie is here. Welcome to the podcast, Congressman Massie.
Thank you, Kennedy. Great to be on.
So this is a really important week to talk about this stuff, because as we're hearing about things like these really prohibitive new gun measures that might be going through Congress, and we see the entire state of Texas cratering because of people's reliance on energy has failed them because the state has not been able to provide basic heat and electricity. So I watched your documentary, Off the Grid, which is on YouTube, and it is fantastic. This is all about your life, your home that you built from materials surrounding you in the hills in eastern Kentucky. But it is a story, a beautiful love story about you and your high school sweetheart, Rhonda, who moved onto her farm and basically built a home from scratch with what you had. And you have solar panels and you have irrigation that would make the greatest survivalist green with envy. So how important is it to be self-reliant in a time like this when pretty much every aspect of society is cratering at least a little bit?
Well, first of all, I'm glad you mentioned my wife, because you have to have a willing partner if you want to go off the grid, if you want to be self-sustaining to a large degree. You described it as romantic. Now, if my wife could describe it to you, she says, I've designed a big science project and she's the mouse in it, and that occasionally I come and add more features to the maze that she gets to traverse every week when I'm in Washington, D.C.
It is a tremendous amount of work, though. I mean, you have cows, you have chickens, you have ducks, you have ponds, you have ways for the pond water to go into other parts that need to be watered. And you take the dried, fallen logs from the forest surrounding your home, you cut them up, and that's what heats your house in a clean way. It is, it's unbelievable. But I was watching this and I got tired because that is a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. And I'm glad you mentioned the trees. Like, those are woven into our existence. Our house is a timber frame house, which means it's built with large timbers that I cut on a sawmill on my farm. But we didn't cut down any of the trees to get the timbers because they fell down in an ice storm. And there's so much natural lumber and wood that gets wasted, and fuel, that if you just endeavor to use it when it falls down, you can do a lot. So, we built our house with fallen trees, and we heat our house with fallen trees, because now that our house is done, then when the trees fall in the woods, I don't know if it makes a sound or not, but it sure makes a lot of BTUs. If you go down there with the chainsaw and cut it up and then split it and then stack it in your house and burn it in a wood gasification boiler, which is what our house is heated with, it gasifies the wood so that there's very little emissions from it. When our neighbors look at our house, they see a small trail of steam coming out the chimney, but never smoke. And the steam is from the moisture in the wood. That's literally about the only thing we can't burn in a gasifying boiler. So that's how the wood comes into play. And then water is so important. We dug our own well. There is city water nearby. We could have run a line to our house, but the city water has chlorine in it and these sediments that are in it because of what they do to treat the water. And I told my wife, Rhonda, I said, look, let's just dig a well. And if we have to build a refinery or a distillation unit in the basement, we'll do whatever we need to do to take those water molecules and make them drinkable. And it can't be any worse than what the city water is. And it turns out the water, when we dug the well, it was pretty darn close to perfect. There were only a couple things we needed to add in our basement to make it really good.
You just add a Brita filter and you're good.
Well, it was a little more complicated than that. We had to adjust the pH because my oldest daughter, her hair turned blue. And that was
that's
because
just adolescence.
Yeah, well, it's not cool when you're 12 years old and you're trying to be, blend in, and you go to school, and I'm looking at my wife and I'm like, does her hair look a little blue to you? And she says, yeah, I think it does. But it turned out that the pH was naturally low, and so it was dissolving some of the copper in our pipes and then depositing that in her hair. And so I had to add something to neutralize the water, but it turns out it's another natural solution. You just put marble chips, it's calcium carbonate, CaCO3, in a little vat, and you have to add more marble chips like every 4 years. And that's all you have to do. So it's like simple little things like that.
Yeah, but
so then we got the water there.
A brain for that. Like, you have a brain for, not only this natural self-reliance, which, maybe is born geographically, maybe it's born from adventure, but you also have the kind of mind where you like to solve problems. Now, for those of us, like for me, my idea of self-sustaining would be getting a prefab log cabin and plopping it on the side of a lake where I can fish and wakeboard. And I would like to also have the chickens, because chickens are delicious and so are their eggs. And, a well-stocked bar and a pontoon for friends. Like, that's my idea of sustainability. And of course, I want solar panels and I want a gray water tank and all of that great stuff. But I don't have the energy or science background that you have. So how does someone start? If someone wants to, if someone wants to have this level of self-sustainability, where can they start?
Yeah. Well, first of all, every solution needs to be local. So what works in Kentucky might not work in New York, or what works in California might not work in Kentucky. So for instance, one of the sources that I have for water, it doesn't make sense to filter all the water, like the water that I'm going to feed, provide to the cattle or to the chickens, or water my trees with. We don't care what the pH is for that. Natural would be fine. So because we live in the hills, I built a pond that's 200 feet in elevation above our house, and then ran plastic pipe underground down to our homestead. And it turns out when it gets to the house, it's now 55 degrees, regardless of what time of the year it is, because it's had that geothermal transfer of energy with the earth. And it's 55 degrees in Kentucky once you get 10 feet underground, but it's also 88 PSI. So there's no pumps. And I can wash cars, I can spray the water like 20 or 30 feet, and it will last 500 years. But every solution is local. So let me start with that. And you can start with small things. So for instance, one of my most favorite self-sustainable green features of our house is our pizza oven. And I cooked a duck in it last night using wood. And it didn't require any solar power. It didn't require drawing down the electrons from our Tesla car battery. By the way, I have a car battery out of a wrecked Model S Tesla in our basement that powers our house at night. But I didn't need to use that battery because I had the pizza oven. So look, and I call it a pizza oven, but I cooked a duck in it. It wasn't duck pizza. You can cook anything.
It's a wood-burning oven, which always makes things, to anyone who's had a pizza from a wood-burning oven, you know that it makes everything taste so much better. I have a quick question about the ducks. Yeah. So you were trying to crossbreed an egg duck and a meat duck.
Yes.
And what was the ultimate result? Is it eggs that taste like meat?
No, it's egg-laying ducks that get larger than your average egg-laying duck, so that if they drop production of eggs, you just basically butcher them, turn them into meat.
Yep.
You eat them. So it's, this is another thing. If you get too specialized, there's so many specialized breeds out there. Like if you're going to raise livestock, look for dual purpose animals, whether it's a chicken or a duck or a cow. Because some cows are built for milk and some cows are built for hamburgers, but look for dual purpose animals. And I think that's just sort of something in life. If you can buy one vehicle and it can do.
For the full podcast, go to foxnewspodcast.com.